As promised, I am now joined by Jessamine County District 39 candidate Ryan Stanford. Ryan, thank you so much for being here, my friend. It's been a while since you and I have seen each other. I was sitting here thinking, when was the last time me and you seen each other face to face?
It had to have been during like one of those all-star challenges over there at Jordan's house or something like that.
Yeah, because we're in a basketball league together, fantasy. We're in a football fantasy league together, so we used to get up with each other a lot and see each other, but man, the way people's schedule is now and then, it's just hard to get together like we used to. You've certainly been busy. Are you when you're not campaigning and you're just like hanging out, relaxing, what do you do to kind of just lay low and chill and just relieve all your stress?
Well, I tell you, there's not much chill time these days. Many of my days are spent, if we're not out campaigning, then I'm on a soccer sideline. You know, I help coach with the high school team, the middle school team. I help coach a club soccer team, as well as my youngest daughter's U4 soccer team, which I don't know if it's even soccer at this point, but it looks like there's balls involved. So as long as they get snacks, we're good to go. But I don't know if there's much chill time right now, to be honest with you. It is going, and at times it's stressful. But the way my mind works at this point, I'd almost rather stay busy. And let's just keep cracking at it. And I don't want to feel like there's any stones that we haven't turned over and any doors that we haven't knocked, or at least put a piece of lit in their door or something like that. So yeah, a lot of time is going into the campaign, but the rest of the time is trying to be a decent dad still at the end of the day, because it does take up a lot of time. You know,
I was sitting here thinking of when the first time I met you, because I've known you for a long time.
Yes, sir.
It's 2024. I want to say I met you around 2013-ish, 14-ish. I remember one of the first times I ever seen you. I'm going to tell you my side, my point of view.
Okay.
So I remember walking into, we were at Zach's house. He was having a barbecue, and I remember we were all like filling our oats, 24, 23, 25 years old. Everybody was off to the side drinking, whatever, having fun. And then I look over, and I see you, who I don't remember ever meeting you before this. I see you with a little baby. And I see you playing with this baby, and I remember asking another guy that was there, I said, "Who's that baby that Ryan is with?" And they were like, "That's his daughter." And I was like, oh, it just kind of took me off guard because you were so young and you were so good with the baby. And I've watched you just evolve over the years as a father, man, just on following you on Facebook. You're so good at just being a dad. You can just tell you enjoy it. What was that like, man, being a single dad at such a young age, raising a daughter?
Humbling, to say the least. You know, the moment I found out I was having a daughter, things just kind of clicked. And I would go back and whoop my own butt 15 times over again for the way I acted and the way I was before I had a daughter. And it just, having a kid puts things in perspective for you that, you know, I was 19, 20 years old at the time. So my friends, I was probably one of the younger ones in the bunch, but a lot of my friends were getting to a point where they were starting to go out. We just hit 21 there, so they're going to bars and things like that. And my weekends, you know, I had to work to keep the lights on. So a lot of my weekends, you know, we had a 4-3 custody split. So I had 4 days one week, 3 days the next week, and a lot of it geared up around my days off because I wanted to maximize my time with my kid, which happened to be on weekends. So when my friends were going out and drinking and hanging out and doing typical, you know, 21, 22-year-old stuff, I was at home with a baby. And, you know, I don't regret any of that. You know, for me, it kept me from getting in trouble. It kept me from, you know, I'm still able to experience life and still was able to experience life. But it was just, you know, everything in our life happens for a reason. The good, the bad, the ugly. And at 20 years old, getting that call and finding out, you know, you had a kid on the way, it's like
life's over, you think?
Temporarily, you think that, but then you start to go to these appointments and you see the ultrasounds and things like that, and you're like, "That's my baby." And then
I created that,
and then exactly, and then, you know, after she was born, you know, my first daughter Emory, everything went so fast, and she was the best kid, and I knew I was going to pay for it. My second kid was she was sassy. She goes 0 to 160 seconds, but she, you know, everything was just so easy with her, and you know, I when I grew up, I didn't have a lot of it was just a little bit different for me. So, I had some examples of what I didn't want to be and things like that growing up. And for me, I want to be involved. I want to enjoy the moments. And, so whenever I was younger and kind of figuring out life, it's like instead of going out and buying a big screen TV, it's like, hey, we're going to go and take a trip. Let's go to the beach. Let's go do this. So,
yes, I see that on Facebook. Like you'll be surprising her with a beach trip. She never went to the beach before, and you took her to the beach. And I was like, man, Ryan is such a good dad. You recently had a second kid, or 2 years ago, right?
Yes,
yeah. So man, that's awesome, and I just love that you're so involved now. You help coach. You mentioned her soccer team.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it's just so good to see that involvement. You can tell she really thinks a lot of you, and the fact that she's seen you do this, she's got to be proud of you. Do you guys go to many UK football, basketball games?
She's been to a few different games. We go to, usually when it's me and my daughter, we go to a soccer game. So the men a few years ago had a really good team and put together a few good seasons. And the women this year are doing really well. So we haven't been to anything this year, but we always did some either team bonding event. I took the whole team and we went. We had one opportunity where we got to walk on the field with the girls and things like that, which was awesome. But most of the time, we've been to everything. She's been to NBA games. She's been to an NFL game. She's been to baseball games. We've been to baseball games in Pittsburgh. So she's done a lot of different stuff, way more than I did at her age, at least my oldest daughter. But yeah, we don't go to too many UK football games, but that is something I do enjoy to go to.
Yes, we've been to a couple ball games ourselves. We went to Cincinnati Reds. Are you still on the Reds train or not so much?
Always. They make it a little tougher to keep up some years than others. And this year has been like we would come out and we would go 7-3 in your last 10, and then we would hit a 3-7 stretch. And it was like we could never play above 500. And we have some really nice young pieces there, and I look forward to seeing as they continue to get better and things. But I do think we need to change, just a different voice, as a manager.
Well, David Bell, I don't know if you heard, just recently got knocked off the team. They fired him.
Oh, wow. So I'm way behind on that.
They fired him. See, you're so busy. You didn't even hear about David Bell getting fired. Yes, they're looking for a new manager.
Okay.
But here's the thing. I don't necessarily know if David Bell was the problem, because to me, I don't think in-game management, now I'm not going to be somebody that claims to know a lot about baseball and in-game management, but I just felt like that the pieces it wasn't David Bell. I don't feel like that it was his problem, but that's just one opinion. Is there a manager that you would like to see the Reds get? Is there a name out there that you would be like, I would love to see him come to the Reds?
Nobody in mind, to be honest with you. When I think of managers, I always get hit with the old names like Lou Piniella and things like that, guys that are long gone from the game. But I want to see somebody come in like David Bell had really good energy. I think he's been thrown out of more games over the last few years than any other manager. But
I love that too.
I like that fire energy, but I want to see it across the board, not just whenever you're arguing balls and strikes and things like that out there, but across the board. And so I think, one of the things we messed up on about a decade ago is we gave up on Dusty Baker maybe a year or two too early when we still had a window to win. And so, I think if you're going to keep a coach like David Bell around, you needed a guy or two like a Joey Votto or something like that still in that clubhouse. So just somebody that's going to come in there and just command respect right out of the gate. With a lot of young guys, you have to grab that thing by the horns, man.
And sometimes a new voice is sometimes all a team needs. UK certainly knows a thing or two about a new voice. We just replaced John Calipari with Mark Pope. I was a big Cal guy. I thought Cal was amazing. There were some things that frustrated me about Cal. The biggest thing that frustrated me about Cal was his priority on NBA. That was his main priority, was getting players the big $1 million contracts. Pope is now, he's got a new philosophy. I don't know if you read where he even removed the NBA banner.
I did see that. That's awesome.
I thought that was awesome too. I was like, yes, because the reasoning behind removing that banner was because Pope said that our main focus as Kentucky players needs to be hanging banners. So I do like his philosophy a lot better than Cal. How do you feel about Mark Pope being the new man in charge? Because a lot of people want to say, oh, he's from the 96 championship team. People, you got to remember, folks, it wasn't Mark Pope that coached us to the 96 championship. It was Pitino. But what's your thoughts on the new man in charge in Lexington?
Well, I really like Mark Pope. He has came in with that type of energy that I want to see the Reds come. Just come in and grab this thing by the horns. Like, a lot of people initially, that initial response is like, is he ready for this yet? What has he done at BYU? Blah, blah, blah. We were looking for that big splash hire because it's Kentucky. It's the mecca of college basketball. But, Mark Pope, I think Barnhart is yearned for somebody, like he wanted somebody that had connections to the program directly. Not another outsider or anything like that. Not somebody that was going to make it about themselves like Cal ultimately did, but somebody that's going to make it about the name on the front of the jersey, and that's what Mark Pope's doing, and I respect Calipari and everything he did for our program. I'm not one of these people that really jumped on his back the last few years, but maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I did kind of start highlighting that it just didn't feel like Kentucky basketball anymore. I was used to growing up and falling in love with a kid and watching him develop over 2, 3, 4 years, and growing up, outside of maybe Azubuike and Randolph Morris and a handful of these guys that left after 2 or 3 years. Most guys we got to see for 4 years, and you respected the fact that they went in there and they grinded it out, no matter whether they had 5 minutes their freshman year or they played 20 minutes or whatever. But like I said, you got to watch these kids grow up in front of you, and especially some of these local kids. And over the last 10 years, we didn't get that anymore. And how much did people really enjoy watching Reed Shepherd play last year and locking onto him? And so we didn't really have that feeling for a long time. We got a taste of it last year, and I think we'll get a lot more of that moving forward with Mark Pope at the helm.
All right. Well, I could talk sports with you all day, but unfortunately, we got this little campaign that we got to get to, running for State Representative District 39 in Jessamine County. Ryan, I want you to just start off by talking about what it was like for you growing up in Jessamine County, because you kind of grew up a little bit in Jessamine County, a little bit in Lexington, but a big part of your life was growing up in Jessamine County. Talk about what it was like growing up there.
Yes, sir. So, I moved out to Jessamine County in 2003, so towards the end of my 8th grade year, and I finished out my 8th grade year at Tates Creek Middle School here in Lexington. And when I went out to Jessamine County, it's when you try to transition and mesh with kids that are a little bit older, so at that high school level, it's a little bit tougher. So my first year, my freshman year, it was tough, just because you're going in there, you're trying to break into these friendship circles that have been established for 4, 5, 6 years since grade school. And so it is a little bit tougher to do that. But I was fortunate enough to have, some really awesome coaches, some really great teachers, some really good mentors that kept me on track, kept me focused. And, I've always been this kind of outgoing personality. And I get nervous about everything these days, but I've always kind of been like...
you have definitely been.
But so I was able to kind of be a class clown and kind of come out a little bit. But yeah, it was initially it was tough. But what I've learned, and I think as we're younger, we're like, I want to move away, I want to do this, I want to do that, and I have moved away a few times as an adult, but I always ended up right back in Jessamine County. And when I had a kid, and she started to get to a school level age, I knew I wanted to be back in Jessamine County. I wanted her to go to schools there and things like that. And so Jessamine County is big enough to where there's stuff to do. It's close enough to Lexington where I'm not too far out from that. But it still has that hometown feel to it. And, Jessamine County is full of a lot of hard-working people. And it fits the bill for me. I'm in here in my work uniform right now. My work truck's parked out on the street. Hopefully it doesn't get towed out of here. But, it just lines up with who I am and a lot of my values and who I believe in and where I want to raise my kids and establish my family at. And that's where we're at, Jessamine County.
You obviously care about your hometown. Why is it that you decided at this point in your life that you needed to put yourself out there and run for state representative?
Well, I think what we see is every election cycle, I feel like most people feel like there's a bigger disconnect between themselves and Frankfort or themselves and Washington each cycle. And it doesn't, whether you're Republican or Democrat, it doesn't feel like they're working for us anymore. And, I tell people it's not really... the middle class is gone. So essentially you have the working class, then you have whatever you want to call it, the elite, the establishment, whatever else. And I feel like the working class is so blended now, but it's like we're divided amongst silly stuff. Politics shouldn't divide us. People talk all the time about other countries getting bold. So the issues that are going on with Russia and Ukraine, or what's going on with China potentially in Taiwan, or China and India, or what's going on with Israel and God. So it's like we talk about all the conflict that's going on in the world, and we say, well, it's because of weak leadership here, this or that, blah, blah, blah. No, the reality is that other countries are being emboldened, or other countries are being more aggressive because of how divided we are here. We have talking heads getting on TV and talking about civil wars here in our country. Mm-hmm. So if you're another superpower, you're another country that has any aspirations of gaining more land or doing whatever, now's the time whenever, the U.S. is sitting here and we're divided amongst over some of the silliest stuff. So I think for me, things started to hit closer and closer to home. So we look at, whether it's workers' rights, talking about taking away overtime pay, or lunch breaks, or paid drive time, things like that. It all affects me directly. And we get so consumed sometimes by national politics that we ignore local politics, and we don't realize that affects the roads we drive on every day, the healthcare opportunities we have, the education opportunities that our kids or grandkids are going to have. And so I decided, like, hey, it's time to put up or shut up. And I felt like as a state representative, I could bring transparency to Frankfort and the people in my district. I have a big portion of Nicholasville and parts of Lexington, so like southeast Fayette County. But I just feel like I could bring that transparency that we're missing right now.
You're out on the campaign trail, and talk a little bit about what that's been like. What are you doing? Are you going door to door, or seeing people face to face? Are you having public forums? Do you plan on, or have you met your opponent yet? And do you plan on doing a debate, or would you be willing to do a debate if he wanted?
I would definitely be willing to do a debate if he wanted to. We actually just the Kentucky League of Women Voters just came out and said that only one Republican accepted their invite to come out to their forums. Wow. So it's, I get that some candidates probably feel like maybe the questioning or some of that stuff can be a little skewed, but I would welcome any forum. As far as our campaign goes, we have been working door to door. One of my initial focuses was going out and meeting people where they're at. So going to our local festivals, going to our local music events, and just seeing people where they're at and trying to form an organic relationship, not showing up and trying to take over it and make it about me, but showing up and saying, hey, I am Ryan Stanford. I'm here to support you in what you're doing, and having conversations. And we feel like because of that, we have really started to bridge the gap in this area. Democrats lost by 22 points in 2020 and 19 points in 22. Just so to say that we had a lot of work to do would be an understatement. But I feel like because of our ties to the community, because of the work we're putting in out there, that we are bridging that gap. We've made this thing pretty close. So yes, sir. And I have met him once. I actually went and introduced myself. I served some meals for the Jessamine County Homeless Coalition for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I think he found out we were at the Thanksgiving one because he showed up at the Christmas one to shake some hands. And when I was done serving, I went over there and introduced myself and said hi to him. So outside of that, I haven't talked to him or said anything else.
Well, we are live, and a lot of the Lexington community and Jessamine community are listening to the station now, so I am sure they want to know where you stand on certain issues. As a state rep, if elected, you will be one of the votes. You will be making big, important political decisions. So I just want to run through these really quick, and for the sake of time, we'll really have to keep our answers brief.
Yes, sir.
But let's start with the big one here, abortion. Roe versus Wade was overturned in Kentucky, which essentially made abortion illegal in Kentucky. Where do you stand in terms of abortion rights?
We should definitely have exceptions in Kentucky. So whether it be rape or incest, when you heard Hadley Duval's story last year during the gubernatorial election, that really hit home because it put a face with it. It wasn't just people saying, well, oh, what about the case of this girl or this or that? But it put a case on a 12-year-old girl that, was taken advantage, and had to deal with all that and the trauma that comes with that. So, for me, I think what was scary about 22 is that we had the option to vote for that. So I know in my case, I voted no on 2 and 22, and that was to keep the state constitution the way it was, to not make any amendment or not change anything, and to protect women's right to an abortion. And nobody wants an abortion. I hate saying that, that it's an ugly term. Me as a father, I never considered having an abortion. Like, it was like, oh, we're having a baby? Okay, let's figure this thing out. I got a second job, boom, boom, boom. But there's different circumstances for different people. And so women should have the opportunity to make decisions. I don't think any healthcare decision should be forced upon people across the board, period. And in this case, definitely not. And so, like I said, what was scary about this is that we voted no on 2 years ago. That won statewide, and despite it winning, they still changed the Constitution. So why did we even vote?
Right. Yeah. Amendment 2, and folks, for those listening at home, Kentucky Constitutional Amendment 2 will allow state funding for non-public education, and it's on the ballot in Kentucky on November 5th, this next election. If you vote yes, a yes vote supports amending the Constitution to enable the General Assembly to provide state funding to students outside of public schools. If you vote no, a no vote opposes amending the Constitution to enable the General Assembly to provide state funding to students outside of public schools. So my question to you, Ryan, is how do you feel about Amendment 2? Would you vote yes or no, and why?
I vote no. All day, every day, twice on Sunday. That is a terrible amendment. And the reality is that we are already struggling here with educational resources and things like that here in the state. And we finally have this rainy day fund and an opportunity to put more resources into education and to pay our teachers a living wage. You know, we're 42nd in starting pay, 45th in median pay nationally when it comes to teacher salary. So not only do we need to pay our teachers, but we need to put money into our schools, period. You know, there should be no reason why a teacher should have to go out and buy our own resources to teach our kids and things like that. And so I think if we do that, we'll start to see, you know, a lot of people's argument against public schools is that it's cookie cutter, it's this and that. Well, if we give more resources to our school and allow them to hire people that can focus on specific needs and things like that, then we can have tailor-made solutions for kids that don't fit within that normal spectrum, you know, or not normal, but that typical spectrum. And so I just think that, you know, public schools or public funding belongs in public schools, period. You know, when we've as a taxpayer, I'm concerned where my tax dollars would go if we did open up Pandora's box on this thing. You know, we learned, whether it was the flooding in eastern Kentucky or the tornadoes that hit western Kentucky, that public schools become community centers. You know, so it's more than just teaching our kids. And the reality is I don't think there's any coincidence that in our legislature, in the General Assembly this year, they try to pass through legislation that would loosen child labor laws. In the same year that they're putting a ballot initiative up here. Because what's going to happen to some of these kids in rural areas is that if they can't get into a private school and the public school doesn't have enough funding to stay open, those kids are going back to work. And that's a reality. That's a harsh reality for some people in Kentucky. So I think we just need to think this thing all the way through. And I think if you think it all the way through, you're going to realize that it's not a good idea. It doesn't work here. Maybe if we had a city the size of New York City or Chicago or something like that, you could justify in that particular area. But here, no need for that.
Well, for the sake of time, we're up to your closing remarks. So we're going to end it with one more question, Ryan. What kinds of things do you want to see happen while you are in office, and what kinds of things do you want to push forward if elected state representative?
I want to see transparency come back to Frankfort. You know, they actually try to pass through legislation that would remove some of that transparency. But I want to see transparency come back. I want to protect rights that we have fought for decades, for centuries, whether it's women's rights, whether it's civil rights, whether it's workers' rights. We've already had those fights. We've already had those debates. Why are we doing it again? You know, what we're seeing at this point is regression. You know, and I want to bridge that gap. I want people to be proud of who we're sending to Frankfort again, and I want people to feel like they have a say in the matter again. Like I said, I don't feel like, you know, especially as a Democrat in that area, I definitely don't feel like I have any voice in my area. And I feel like even if I sat down and talked to my opponent or the incumbent there, that they wouldn't really listen to understand. It would just be listen to respond, and that's part of our issue. So I want to see compromise again. I want to see conversations that we're not having. I want to see transparency.
Well, Ryan, we're going to have to do a part 2.
Oh, for sure, man.
I want to thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
It's been awesome. It's great to see you. Election day is November 5th.
Yes, sir.
Go to the post votes. It is your duty, not necessarily your right. It's your duty. This has been Adam Bakes with Off the Cuff. We'll see you next Thursday.
Hi, I'm Lily Rochelle, and this is Radio Lex, the voice of the people. WLXU 93.9 FM in Lexington.